And we are happy to have Chris Eller here, who is with the Advanced Visualization Lab, and he knows lots about 3D.
Some say I do, some say I don't. Actually, I don't know. Yeah, so again, thank you, Claire. So yeah, I'm currently working with the Advanced Visualization Lab, and one of the efforts in the areas that the AVL looks toward is what we call advanced media. In advanced media, one of the main components of advanced media is stereoscopic 3D, and the use of stereoscopic 3D for a variety of uses such as research, digital arts, and other creative uses. So research as well as creative activities are two of our big areas right there. So I'm going to switch over to the slides here. So hopefully everybody out there gets to see the slides as well as everybody in here. And we're just going to talk a little bit about why 3D. This is a brief overview of what's going on and what's possible and what some folks are doing, not only here but out in the industry, and why you might want to use 3D. And we get 3D or stereoscopic media from a variety of areas. You've got old stereograms and stereographs from all over the world, from the mid of the 19th century up to today. This is an old stereograph. I couldn't find a date on it, but this is not from last year. And this was produced, somebody was being a tourist in Egypt at Giza. I was able to read that it was about Giza right there. And these, stereographs, which is a 3D photograph, cards were sold as packs and boxes, and you'd go down and buy the new stereo card pack and have a little viewing party in your viewing room with your neighbors and friends, and you'd look at the new stereographs and visit far off places. And then we moved to moving pictures, so stereoscopic cinema. Everybody's heard of the new 3D movies that have been out for the past couple of years. Of course, the first one sold for that had ticketed attendance was in 1922. And before then, they had stereoscopic movie screenings from around the turn of the century. So it's been around for quite some time, but it's really entered the public consciousness in the past couple of years, really starting in 2009 with the release of Avatar. Really blew the doors open for the general public. You've had, of course, fans who, they've got an old anaglyph copy of House of Wax in their basement that they can put on their 8mm projector and whatnot. But now it's getting much more prevalent. And of course, 3D modeling and animation, which is often used when you talk about modeling and animation, most people think of, oh, Pixar, so they're making, Toy Story or Cars or something like that. But we, of course, have researchers and artists here at IU that are using 3D modeling and animation to develop simulations, say, for geographic events. They may model and then animate to simulate earthquakes. We also have artists that are making objects through 3D modeling, maybe movies about the objects by animating those and then rapid prototyping them and printing them out in 3D. So one of the fellows that had been through IDAH before, Nicole Jacquard, has used 3D modeling and then rapid prototyping to create 3D objects. And of course, scientific visualization and analysis, which is an area that the AVL really has its roots in and specializes in supporting, is how people can better understand very complex concepts or objects in a 3D space. And we'll have an example of that coming up here a little bit. So really, stereoscopy comes in a variety of forms from a variety of areas for a variety of uses. It's not all just to throw spears at the audience in the cinema, though some people do that too. So for a brief overview, why would you even want to create media stereoscopically? How can you create it? Is making your content in 3D worth it? And hey, can I get into this on campus somehow, somewhere? Where can I see it? So here's some the pictures here. That's myself and another grad student, Sean Connolly, on location filming a 3D movie with a 3D video rig. That's that big honking camera right there. And that was used toward my master's degree thesis project right there. It was fun. It was a fiction piece that we filmed out there in the woods. And below that, because can anybody recognize what that still might be from. It's a little stretched on the screen, unfortunately, here.
Is it a movie?
It is a movie. It is a movie from 1955. So this is an anaglyph frame. Anaglyph is where you use color filters to separate the left view and the right view, and you put the glasses on, usually in this case red and cyan filters, so that you can see this in depth. So if anybody that's viewing online has some red cyan anaglyph glasses, you can see that movie frame as it was intended by its director, Alfred Hitchcock.
So they shot it in 3D?
They shot it in 3D. That's Dial M for Murder.
Oh, Dial M for Murder. So what did they shot a 3D version and
Well, the beautiful thing about a 3D movie is it's actually two 2D movies. So if you want to see a 3D movie in 2D, you just watch one eye's worth of footage, and that gives you the 2D version. And in some cases, actually something that we've done here at the cinema is there is a percentage of the population that has a binocular deficiency or they are stereo blind, which means that they either have difficulty viewing content in 3D comfortably, they may experience fatigue or headache over time, or some folks that do not perceive the world in 3D, and so they're not going to see a 3D movie in 3D.
That's funny.
And trying to view a 3D movie, maybe they want to go with a spouse or friends who want to go see a 3D movie, and they want to go along for fellowship, but they are not comfortable watching that, so we want to be able to give them the opportunity of watching the same movie in 2D. And the way you would do that is, you know, the glasses that you wear in a movie theater separate the two images, the left and the right view. And what we can do is change the glasses a little bit, so instead of getting one left view and one right view, you would instead get two left views or two right views. And that way you see a monoscopic version of that movie, so you can go with your friends and enjoy the 2D movie and not suffer from any sort of headache or visual fatigue, and your friends can enjoy the 3D.
How does that work?
We'll talk about that.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. But it works out. It's actually fairly simple. It's one of those things that's kind of like, it's easy. But nobody really thought about it until recently. You can actually go online to, there's a website called Think Geek that has, you know, geeky toys and gifts for geeky friends, and one of them are their 2D movie glasses, which they will charge you money for. Otherwise, you could just go see a 3D movie with a friend and get two pairs of the 3D glasses, and you can do it yourself in a minute.
So what inspired Hitchcock to film in 3D?
Inspired is not quite the right word for Hitchcock's use of 3D in Dial M for Murder. The studio said to him, Hitch, if you're going to film this movie, it has to be something different so that the people don't stay at home watching Howdy Doody on TV. I don't know if that was playing in 1955, but they don't stay at home watching TV, they come back to the theater. And we've only got two ways to really make that happen. Technologically speaking, of course, there's story and making good movies, but technologically, the theater was different from home in two ways. You could go widescreen, or you could go 3D. And Hitchcock was told by the studio, we will withdraw backing for Dial M for Murder unless you either go widescreen or 3D. 55 was the peak of the 3D popularity in that decade right there. And for a long time it was the golden era of 3D in Hollywood until recently. And Hitchcock chose to go 3D. He viewed it as the lesser of two evils because he wanted if anybody's not seen Dial M for Murder, it takes place almost entirely in this small flat. And he wanted it to feel somewhat like a trap. And so a widescreen presentation would work against that feeling. So he wanted to keep it at the narrower 1.37 to 1 aspect ratio to make it feel a little bit more closed in. So he had to film it in 3D. That's why there's some interesting technological choices that they had to make in the movie for the 3D to start to look good and to work correctly. One of them being the placement of this table lamp right here. Another one being a lot of use of what's called motion parallax by moving the camera side to side in a scene so that you see objects at the different planes, the different distances from the camera move across each other in different ways. That's called motion parallax, and it's a very powerful effect in 3D, so they utilize that. And then when the husband is at the club and he dials the phone number to signal the event that's supposed to happen back in the flat, if you notice, it's a big prosthetic finger dialing on this kind of fake prosthetic phone,
Mhm.
because the cameras at the time that they had access to could not have filmed a real finger dialing a phone in 3D correctly because of size problems and limitations of the technology in 1955. So they had to make a phone dial that was about 2 feet across and a big finger to dial it so that they could film it correctly.
Now,
So if you've ever seen, why does that finger look
Yeah.
weird as he's dialing the phone? That's why, because it's 3D.
have you seen that film recently? Like,
I've seen snippets of it in 3D, but not the whole piece.
would they be able to get it at the cinema?
Potentially,
That'd
they
be
could get it
cool.
at the cinema. It depends on the
Want to see the finger?
state. Yeah, you want to see the big dialing finger. But it depends on the state of the material, because oftentimes when they would shoot a film in 3D, that actually was twice the amount of material to archive and to store and to keep the celluloid happy. And oftentimes they'd be short on space or short on funding. They said, oh, just lose one of the reels. And so they lose the left, the right eye reel, and they only have the left eye. Or they had the two reels and they then made an anaglyph print. So they've combined,
Right.
essentially indelibly, the left and the right views onto this anaglyph print, and then got lost one of the reels. So then what you have is just a monoscopic left view, usually the left, and an anaglyph. Now if you have both of those, you can extract the right view from that and reprocess it, but that's a very painstaking process, and will have some error to it. So sometimes the 3D version that you can get is only the anaglyph. For example, the cinema recently screened The Stewardesses, a 1968 sort of softcore movie that was in 3D, and the print that they got was only available as an anaglyph celluloid print, and it had aged. And when film ages, the color fidelity drops. It loses color, and the anaglyph process relies on having accurate color, so that the color filters will work. The red filter in the glasses needs to match the red filter that was used in the print, and if that's no longer the case, it pretty much fails. So the screening, it was one of their midnight screenings, and it was horrible.
Was it
I missed it, unfortunately. I was just too tired. I could not make it over there. But people that I talked to that did go said most people just took the glasses off because the color filtration failed because of the age of the print. It was disappointing in that regard. And it wasn't really a good movie. But it was one of the highest grossing 3D movies of all time.
Really?
Because it was such a novelty.
Okay, so why did they, if they we're getting stuck on this slide, but, and I'm just asking all these questions, but, okay, there was an era where they wanted to bring people to the cinema and they're making these 3D movies, then how did it not take off, or why did it not persist all the way through?
The movies were not always that good. And part of that was they would just take any movie. They said, oh, it's an okay movie. We'll make it in 3D. It'll be great. Which has no bearing. The technology used to film it has almost no bearing on the quality of the movie. And it was oftentimes abused as far as the 3D goes, that it would be very gimmicky and fad-like, and they were always throwing something at the camera. And audiences, as much as directors like to complain about audiences, they're not unsophisticated. And it gets to the point that, it becomes, gimmick is not a good word. And they were still learning. They were learning rules of 3D, plus there were limitations in the technology. So synchronizing two film cameras to draw down the next frame of film and get it seated and exposed at exactly the same time over the course of 10 minutes while you shoot that magazine of film, over the course of 4 months while you're shooting this film entirely, is an extreme challenge. So oftentimes they would develop what are called phase errors, where one camera starts exposing the film slightly ahead of the other camera. So what's recorded is temporarily out of phase. And when you see out of phase content in 3D, it is very disturbing. So it suffered from technological issues. Plus, if you were lucky enough to have a cinema that was what's called a dual band playback system, where it would have two projectors with filters playing on a screen, oftentimes just like they have now. So in the AMC Showplace cinemas here, where you go and you watch and you put on the polarized glasses that look like sunglasses and you watch that. That is how many 3D movies were shown, even back in the 20s. That's not new either, but that's called a two-band system. And now okay, you had all the challenges of synchronizing the film while you're recording it. And then editing it, you got to make sure that your film cutter has the frames lined up correctly. Now you've got this turned over to a projectionist who has to get the two projectors to pull down the film at exactly the same rate as well. And you can see how exhibition of 3D in a way that's not technologically short is very challenging in an analog film-based method. So that hurt in the 50s and later on. And then you still had all the gimmicky films. So now we have digital technology. Very few people are filming 3D movies with film. I don't know of any major project that has been done in film. It's all been done digitally because you can synchronize the cameras exactly. You can get them synchronized to the pixel where they're talking to each other and they say, I am on this pixel when I'm recording it. And the other camera is in agreement. And as far as digital playback goes, again, it's flawless technically. So now you just have the matter of, well, is it a good movie? Which is what we hope to get back to, is that you don't think about the 3D. You're not going to go, my hope is one day that you don't go to a movie and you say, oh, we're going to go see this 3D movie. That you're just like nowadays, you don't go and say, oh, we're going to go see this color movie.
Yeah, right.
Or we're going to go see this talkie. For the sound movie. So the paradigm has shifted over time. So originally movies were, for the most part, black and white. There were some color movies in the turn of the century, not only from hand tinting, but also from 3-color process where they would, that's another thing. But you could have color movies from quite a while back, but black and white was by far the common medium. So movies were in black and white and they were silent. And then you had something like The Jazz Singer happens. And it shows, look what you can do with this new gimmicky technology. Because often, the way that people talk about 3D now is the way they talked about it with sound. I mean, you got quotes from like the United Artists president who's like, who wants to go to a movie to hear actors talk? He actually said that. And just amazing things like that. If you want to have a funny take on this, watch the musical with Gene Kelly, Singing in the Rain. It's about this movie studio that's converting from silence to talkies and all the problems that they run into. And it's hilarious. And then you've got the artists nowadays. So for a while, there were movies and then there were talkies. And then the paradigm shifted. And you then had movies that had sound, and that was just a movie. And then there were silent movies. And then in the 30s, you know, we had color for quite a while. And then what happened? Wizard of Oz hit. That was not the first color movie by far. Not by many years, but it was the successful one. And now people are like, oh, we got to see stuff in color, but apparently only comedies and musicals. You could not do color if it was a serious movie or a drama or a suspense or anything like that. That was the rule. So for a while you had movies and then color movies. And then there's a shift. But that shift took many, many decades. You know, I mean, we're filming, you still film black and white movies now. Again, The Artist as an example. Before then, more of an indie movie, Clerks, was shot black and white, purely for an economic concern. Black and white film is cheaper. But it also imparts a look. Schindler's List, while shot in color, it was processed for black and white so that was how it was presented. Again, for artistic choices. But you then say, oh, we're going to go see a black and white movie.
Right.
Because movie defaults to with color and with sound. And right now we see a movie and then a 3D movie. And at some point, that paradigm will shift. And movies will be dimensional. They will be 3D by default, unless you've made an artistic choice or an economic choice to do it flat, 2D. And so you'll have movies and flat movies.
I was just thinking, you know, I was thinking about the feelies, you know, in, was it 1984? No, Brave New World. You know, they were talking about going to the feelies, where you sit in the movie chair and you, or the chair of the movie, and you feel what's going on on screen. And then when I was home in Canada at Christmas, they're introducing these chairs that, you know, and you can control the motion. Right. But like it moves and
with the movie.
Yeah.
That concept was developed also in the 50s as a technique called sensorama.
Yeah.
So if you've ever seen that, and one of the most horrible examples of that was a movie called The Tingler, in which they essentially, and I'm oversimplifying this a little bit, but they would basically get some car batteries and some wires and wait. And then in the movie, when the Tingler, who is this monster or creature that was approaching, would, of course, be sneaking up behind the hero, and they'd get the tingle on the back of their neck. And what they would then do, the ushers would connect the car battery to the seats, and give the patrons a slight electrical shock. That was the Tingler. And then they also had things with water bottle or water like sprinklers to spray. You know, people do this in a manual method when they watch Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah.
But that's Sensorama, and that's been around for quite a while. So sometimes that's called 4D cinema experience. So you've got the 3D visually, and the fourth dimension is physical through a motion control platform, water in the air. Things like this.
I feel like IMAX kind of does that too. Like IMAX, I mean, I can't imagine what it's like. Who's kicking me off? But like watching a 3D movie in IMAX must be really.
Well, you can go up to Indy. The two of the IMAX screens up there are 3D capable.
Yeah,
so those are one at the Indiana Museum of Art. No, the Indiana State Museum.
Yeah.
And then I can't remember the name of it, but it's in Greenwood. The IMAX that's right off of 465 and 31 in Greenwood is a 3D screen. So it's immersive, and that's one of the words I have later on. So maybe we'll advance to the next slide, and we'll talk about that bullet point. That second point addresses what you're talking about. So why 3D video and animation? And this is found that more information is delivered. You're actually recording two 2D movies, and you're delivering those both to the same person. So you've doubled the amount of visual information that the people are processing. That means you've got more information about the scene, and your brain works a little bit harder to analyze what's going on. More information, it's more information rich. More immersion. People feel, wow, I'm really getting into this place. So they're in there. There's another word that I'll use later on in the slide called transportation. And these are words that researchers in telecommunications are using when they're talking about media consumption and users of media. Do they feel immersed? Do they feel transported? Some disciplines call it flow, where you are, or in the zone. Athletes will call that in the zone. Other folks call it flow. Immersion is what telecom calls it, and that's just where you forget that you're watching a movie and you are just enjoying a story. And that's what's going on right there. Closer to real life, meaning it's a better simulation of what you actually see. There are, for some researchers, they create content that's called orthostereoscopic. And orthostereoscopic content presented on an orthostereoscopic device means that it is as exact as you would see real life, as you would perceive it. Somebody sitting 6 feet away and recorded correctly and then screened correctly while you're watching this movie will appear 6 feet away, exactly as they are. Scale is correct. Proportion is correct. And that's that closer to real life. That's used for simulations as well as testing, research, and that sort of thing. Because actually recording and displaying orthostereoscopic content is very challenging. So we don't even try to do that for the most part around there. Better spatial understanding. Understand where things are and what's going on. I don't have a slide in here for that, but one of the researchers found out. So recently, Pirates of the Caribbean on Stranger Tides, the fourth one, had a scene that normally in the past would have been introduced as a montage. So you've got these sailors in a rowboat and they're rowing somewhere and these mermaids show up surrounding them. And to show surrounding, there's a couple ways a filmmaker could do it. They could have a big bird's eye view camera and you can see all the mermaids around them. Or they could do a montage and they could show the boat from a different angle through this montage and have the mermaid there in the foreground and the boat in the background at a different angle showing that we're around them. Or they could orbit the boat in a long shot. Or you could just shoot it in 3D. Because when you see it in 3D, you see these mermaid heads in the water and you see the boat, and because it's in 3D, you understand, oh wow, they're surrounded. Because you have a better spatial understanding, spatial perception. This is really, when we talk about this to folks that are into, say, dance, they just light up. Because dance is all about the understanding of the space and what the dancer in that space is doing. or just the dancer themselves if the space is supposed to be a negative volume where there is no space, it's just the dancer. Understanding where they are, what they're doing, how they're holding themselves, and those are key items for a dancer, and that's something that 3D grants. And of course, more storytelling options. Does anybody recognize the lower slide right there? What movie that might be from?
It looks familiar.
Very successful movie. It's a stop motion animated movie from, I don't know, about 5 years ago, called Coraline.
Oh.
Is it Tim Robbins?
Pardon?
Is it Tim Robbins?
I know. It was based on a book by Neil Gaiman,
Okay.
by the same name, Coraline, and it was produced as a stop motion piece, and they did it in 3D, and they used a very simple definition of their 3D, how they were going to use the 3D. The story basically, it's this girl Coraline who goes from the real world through this mystical tunnel to this other world. And in the real world, she's unhappy, and it's not a night. I mean, they just moved to the Northwest, so she's just really unhappy. She's left her friends and all that. And so ways to show that visually in a movie, well, the colors are somewhat drab and mute. The weather's overcast and gray, and it's raining, and the 3D is shallow. They recorded the 3D very shallowly. And then when she goes through this tunnel, the 3D increases in depth. The colors become much more vibrant. The weather is nice and clear and sunny, and there are birds out chirping, and all that fun stuff. It's a better place. Not really, but it's a different place, and they used depth to convey her emotional state between these two locations. And it's very subtle. A lot of these things are very subtle, but if you look at any movie, you can look at a frame from a movie and probably, if you look at it for analysis, you'll find 10 or 15 visual choices that are made to affect you while you're watching the movie. Mm-hmm. But as you're watching the movie, you may be aware of one of those choices, but all those other choices are working in concert to give the audience feeling and emotion and a sense of the story. And depth is one of those things, so it can be very subtle. When they're not throwing a spear at the camera, it can be very subtle, right there. Those are some of the storytelling options. The picture above was me recording at a controlled burn out at Brown County State Park. So we've got some footage of a forest fire burn, which was very interesting. There was a lot of smoke.
Not quite as dramatic as one would imagine.
No, not very dramatic, and I'm okay with that.
I was smoldering leaves.
I'm okay with that because I was there.
Yeah.
You don't want to see a big conflagration. Well, you want to see a big conflagration. You don't want to be the camera operator in it. If you
There's
can
no
avoid it.
backdraft.
There was no backdraft. They were very careful about that, and we got the naturalists talking about. So it's turned out to be potentially a very educational movie. I just have to get back to and edit it together because we've looked at the footage and pulled out some snippets and looked at it for impact, and it's very neat. We just need to string it together into a story because that's what we're talking about, is story. Mm-hmm. So 3D visualization, again, we get back to that. More information is delivered. More immersion, again, you can feel like you're right there with that data. Revealing complex relationships. So if anybody's looked at a very complex graph or a chart or a graph that uses 3 axes instead of just 2, it can be a little confusing. When you see it in 3D, you get a better sense of, oh, that object is behind that other object. So it's farther along the z-axis. So, and I know that that means something. And you just have a better understanding. You understand the object better. Better spatial understanding. Again, we get back to understanding where things are and their relationships to each other. And then here's the zinger, understanding of n-dimensional objects. So that picture up there, and I can't decipher it because I don't have the training to do that, but this is a higher dimensional object that is being projected down into 3D space. So what we're seeing is the 3-dimensional shadow of a 4-dimensional object.
Reflection.
Yes. So okay. So you've seen some of these things. So Andrew Hansen was chair of computer science for many years, mathematician. He generated this. And this is a shadow of a much more complex object. And you're only seeing it in 2D. So somebody with training that sees this in 3D is going to have a much better grasp of what the 4D object actually is.
What do you mean training? Like you're just figuring out how to look at it?
Correct.
So
How to decipher it.
Is it kind of like those silhouette things where you see two things happening at the same time?
I don't believe so.
I mean, in terms of the training.
Because that's a different sort. Well, that's
Does this play with your eyes if you have the training?
Well, it's not that it plays with your eyes. What it is there's a lot of complex information in it. Overlapping information, the layers, these two different layers where you see part of the object in front of another part of the object. In 3D space, that just means that it's closer to you. But in 4D space, that can mean that that is another facet of a more complex object. Not just that it's closer to you, but it's also a different part of the object. Or the same part of the object from a different point of view. I haven't had the math to understand it very well, other than the analog going up. So if you look at a shadow on the ground of your hand, that shadow is a 2D representation of your three-dimensional hand. This object, or you could imagine your hand a shadow representation of a four-dimensional object.
Right.
And that's what this is. And for folks that can't understand these, their understanding of them comes quicker and is more intuitive when they view it stereoscopically than just three-dimensionally. And there are ways in 2D that you can show the object, like animating it, turning it, exploring it, changing parameters that changes the shape of the object. You get an understanding that way. But if you can view it in 3D, you have that much better an understanding. So, and that's why some people are using stereoscopic 3D in their visualization. Even for more mundane, I shouldn't say mundane, normal three-dimensional objects, chemicals. So we have a lot of chemists and biologists that use 3D modeling to look at a complex molecule. You know, when you draw a molecule out on a board, okay, it's a couple circles and a couple sticks connecting it. Well, it's not really like that. The molecule has a dimension, it has a shape to it that's very specific, and that specific shape is part of what grants that molecule its behavior and how it is what it is. And like the difference between sugar and Splenda. So if everybody's heard about sugar, you've enjoyed sugar, yes. But if you can't have sugar, you get this stuff called Splenda, which tastes like sugar. Well, they say it tastes like sugar. It does. It's a sugar substitute. What it is it's a sugar molecule that's backward. So this is what's called a chiral. So if you hold out your hand, hold out one hand, and just make a shape with it. It doesn't matter. Make a fist, make a ball, it doesn't matter. Do the exact same thing with your other hand. Okay, is it the same shape? Well, does it look the same? Pretty close. What's different about it? It's a mirror image. That is what sugar and Splenda are. This is called a chiral in chemistry terms. So Splenda is the sugar chiral. And I'm sure any chemists out there that are listening are thinking, I was using that term, okay, but that's how it's been explained to me. And sugar and Splenda have exactly the same chemical makeup, but one is a mirror object of the other. And that means your body doesn't absorb it the same way, because your body expects sugar to be shaped like sugar. And when it's not, it just ignores it and passes it through, or gives you a headache. Either way. But that is a sense where shape, not only just what it's made of, but its shape is important. And viewing shape in 3D is a really great way to understand how an object is shaped and why it's shaped the way it is shaped. I should find some pictures to show that show this shape disambiguation, but I haven't yet, so I apologize. So we're going to move on. So here's how it's created. So we talked a little bit about creation of 3D. So for video, we could just use two cameras. Well, the reason you see 3D in the real world is, surprise, because you have two eyes. And each eye sees the world from a slightly different perspective. One from the left side, one from the right side. No, the eyes aren't a chiral in this sense. So of those two views, when your brain combines the two views together, you get 3D. This is a process called stereopsis. And the way Hollywood does it is you put two cameras side by side, and you record the movie, the scene, from a slightly different point of view. And then when you present that in a 3D cinema, your left eye sees what the left camera recorded, and your right eye sees what the right camera recorded. Your brain puts it together in a process called stereopsis, and you're done. You're good to go. So this is a picture of two of our students in the Department of Telecommunications on location recording with the 3D camera, and she is hand-holding that 42-pound 3D camera. She's
42
awesome.
pounds.
42 pounds.
Ay, hey.
Oh, that's like, what, 18 kilos, eh?
Hey,
Oh, yeah.
that's bigger than a hockey bag.
That's it. Oh, you know, I don't know, not unless you're a goalie. You know, when you're back there to goalkeep, oh, you know it.
Oh, you
Anyway,
can't
so
hear
Claire
it.
and I go way back to, you know, Canada.
Actually, why they can't,
she goes to
they
Canada, I
can't
don't.
hear from the other side.
Other than visiting.
Oh.
So anyway, so that's the way Hollywood does it
Second
with two
link.
cameras. Now, if you're doing stop motion, if you remember back to Coraline, they did it with one camera, but the neat thing about stop motion content is you set up the frame with the maquettes, basically the little dolls and the scene, you take a picture. Well, while you're there, scoot the camera over a little bit to the side and take another picture, and then set the scene for the next frame, and then take two pictures of each frame. Those are your left and right pairs.
Caroline has done one scene, one little.
Oh,
That's correct. Well, yes, that's what a stop motion movie is. Stop motion animation is one frame at a time. It took them many, many months. Many, many months.
How many frames per second?
24. So a full-length feature has somewhere in the order of 80,000 frames. Maybe 120,000 frames, depending on if it's like 90 minutes or 120 minutes. Yeah. Yes, it takes a long time for stop motion. It's a very time-intensive process. But you can do it with one camera, which is very handy in that regard. Now, for computer-generated animation, like what they do with Pixar, so Cars and Toy Story and all that, you use two virtual cameras. So this render down here, this is a scene. There's a couch and a seat and a coffee table. And those two green wireframe boxes there are your cameras that you render the scene in, are these two cameras. Just like the two physical cameras that the students are using, you can use two virtual cameras side by side, and they go through and record the scene. A left view and a right view. That's what you need for a 3D movie. Is 3D worth it? Well, on the left side, here's what you need. You need more equipment if you're filming it in real world. You need more time, because it takes more time to set up the camera. It takes more time to move the camera. It takes more time to plan your movie to use the 3D camera at the present, because a lot of the people that are out there have been trained in 2D. That's just the way it is. They have to learn 3D, so it takes more time. Once folks become more facile with 3D, that time factor is going to reduce to some extent as far as production goes. Post-production, you've doubled everything, because you have to render everything twice, the left view and the right view. They need more expertise. You need to know what you're doing right there. But when you do those things, what you get over on the right side, you get more realism, you get more immersion, you get more detail, you get more. You get 3D. It's really neat stuff. Anybody know the three gentlemen here in the middle? You probably know at least one of them.
Spielberg, Cameron, and then who's the other?
The other guy is David Geffen.
Oh,
He's the G. No, I'm sorry, not David Geffen. Jeffrey Katzenberg.
Yeah.
The G is in there too. Jeffrey Katzenberg. He is the K in DreamWorks SKG. The S is Spielberg. The G is Geffen. So Spielberg and Katzenberg are they're DreamWorks. They're a third of DreamWorks. What they're standing with are 3 of the 6 cameras that they used to film Avatar. And these are 3 very different cameras. Remember we talked about how 3D is, you need more equipment. Well, the camera rig that James Cameron is holding there on his shoulder is what they use for close shots. The one that Katzenberg is leaning on was used for medium shots, and the one that Spielberg is standing behind is used for long shots.
So you can't zoom yet?
You can, but zooming looks very weird in 3D.
Oh.
Because 3D, again, it's much more realistic, it's much more immersive. Do your eyes zoom?
I see what you mean.
They don't. So when you show zooming in 3D, it is weird. we may become used to it. We may accommodate that, but it's very strange. So you tend to use what are called prime lenses that don't zoom, they just do what they do. And you move the camera. So it's the old thing called zooming with your feet, or zoom with the dolly. You move the camera, but you get a lot of benefits from that. You get, when lenses zoom, they exhibit this trait called teledecentricity, which you don't want, which means the optical center of the lens tends to wiggle around just a little bit. And when you don't zoom, you don't get that. You also, when you zoom with your feet or on a dolly, you get motion parallax, which is so rich in experience. When you see it in 3D and you see motion parallax, it's just gorgeous. If you have not had a chance to see Hugo in 3D yet, go. Because they move the camera all over the place and do just so many things, and it is so, you feel like you're in that train station. It's just unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, you need more, but you get more, right there. And so they filmed Avatar with 6 cameras. Peter Jackson is filming The Hobbit with 16 cameras. 16 3D cameras, which actually means 32 cameras that are bundled together into 16 rigs. And yeah, it's more complex that way.
And they're all different for the purpose of...
They're all special. Well, so they have several that are similar. They really have 8 different cameras for their primary, their A group, and then that same 8 cameras for their B crew.
Okay.
So that the cameras they all have different capabilities and they're used for different situations, but A and B can use for those same situations. Luckily, they've been doing video diaries from behind the scenes, and I think they're up to 6 of them now. They're about 10 minutes long a piece. The third or fourth video diary, the 4th one, specifically talks about the 3D technology, and it's a great little talk with them because they're trying to figure out, how do we use this? How does this affect story, which is the magic word right there. And they've made some decisions, and it's going to be exciting to see how they're using 3D to help tell the story. Very neat stuff. But it is much more complex, and Jackson's telling you right there, he starts out with, there's this perception that 3D is cumbersome and big and bulky, and that's true. But they build custom cameras that are different. You can see the size of the camera, the physical difference between the one that Katzenberg is leaning on and the one that's on Cameron's shoulder. They're physically different. They probably weigh 20 pounds different also. But they are still, it's a big, bulky, ugly camera. They're getting better, but it's very challenging to do some of these things. So, some people are finding out, is 3D really worth it? Audiences remember more. The advertisers are so happy that they did commercials, and they found that when people saw the commercials in 3D, their recall was something like 68%, whereas the control group that watched them in 2D, the recall was like 40-something%.
Wow. So
you're going to see more 3D commercials coming up if you have like ESPN 3D or 3Net or any of these 3D channels, which you can get through some of your the satellite or cable providers. Audiences feel more transportation. There's that word, transportation. That's something that people are going to get a better sense of when they see The Hobbit, that they get a sense of when they saw Avatar. And you're flying, when he first gets that banshee under control, when he has to go catch the big banshee, and then they go off the cliff. If you weren't, if you're not a fan of flying,
yeah,
you probably grab the handrail, the armrests on your seat. And folks that love flying were probably sitting forward and really enjoying that. That's transportation, right there. When you are there, when you're moved into there. Audiences feel more immersion. Again, and this is what Peter Jackson is trying to do. In The Hobbit, they go through a place called Mirkwood, which is a forest that tries to swallow you and consume you. And they talked about how, and we are doing everything we know to make you feel that way. So when they're going through Mirkwood, you're going to be looking over your shoulder, and you're going to wonder if that branch is going to get you when you're sitting there in the theater. They're trying that. And audiences better understand shape and movement. This image here is a still from the documentary that's been getting rave reviews right now called Peanut, which is a documentary by dance designer Pina Bausch. And that has been just blowing everybody's doors off. Last year it was Cave of Forgotten Dreams, documentary by Werner Herzog. That's been blowing everybody's doors off in a more subtle way, because people are realizing, because so that was a documentary about these cave paintings that were found in France. The not Chavo, what cave was it?
Moscow.
Pardon?
Moscow.
Lascaux? No.
LASC.
No, it was somebody else. It'll come to me about 2 in the afternoon.
Mhm.
And cave walls, contrary to popular belief, cave walls are not flat. And the paintings on these walls took advantage of the shape of the walls, the depth, the relief, and the recesses in those walls affected and informed the paintings. And when you see it in 2D, you're looking at a 2D projection of a 3D surface, and there's something missing. And when you see it in 3D, you understand, you see, wow, the wall curves away and the paint lines follow that curve in such a way that it emphasizes it. So that really helped people get a better understanding of the canvas that these paintings were put on. And Pina is going to do the same thing for dance for a lot of people. We've got some 3D footage of dance. An Argentine group came here through Bloomington last year called This Is Tango Now.
Oh.
And we got a chance to film some of their content. And you played for it. Well, you may have seen during the rehearsal though, our 3D camera, that big rig with the kids.
Oh, okay, yeah.
That was us.
Yeah.
And the 3D when they got the first footage and showed it to the director, and he was like, "Come back for the real performance." And we will take the seats out of the front row, and you can just move the camera wherever you want, because they were moved by that. And Pina's going to do the same thing with a higher production quality than what we can do here. You know, we've got students working on an experimental rig. Yeah, it's good, but it's not great. The equipment that Wim Wenders was able to secure for Pina is going to mean that just the technical quality of the movie is going to be high, so that you're not going to see any problems optically. You're just going to enjoy the content. So here on campus, who's doing 3D? Well, the Advanced Visualization Lab, through our efforts that we call ADAM, Advanced Digital Arts and Media. These are our efforts that encompass stereoscopic 3D through the digital arts and use of media and everybody that is working on 3D content. The Department of Telecommunications through the 3D storytelling class that I teach over there. So it's a 400 level production class. We have a lot of seniors, one grad student this semester, that are trying to make some really compelling content, good stories. And we're gonna showcase that at the end of the semester on May 1st at the IU Cinema. So that'll be very nice. The digital art program through the School of Fine Arts, they've been doing 3D modeling and animation as well as virtual reality environments for many years now. So they've been there with us. And some of them are looking at video as well. So some of the digital art students work in video. And one of them filmed a short with a pair of iPhones as his video source, and was able to play that. We got it into the cinema. It worked out pretty well. We also, I need to add them to this list here, but the the new media students and faculty in the School of Informatics up at IUPUI, they've been working with 3D content up there for several years now. And then, of course, we have the IU Cinema. This is a premier world-class cinema that's 3D capable. And they get to do a lot of very neat things in 3D. In addition to showing our showcase here, they were the ones that had the world premiere of Cave of Forgotten Dreams showed here. This was the world premiere right here. And it was just a wonderful experience. It sold out. It was really great. And then people are utilizing these resources through various projects all across IU. We've got researchers, we've got educators, we've got creative artists that are doing stuff in 3D. We've got some footage that we shot for the athletics department of IU football that we then sent some clips out to ESPN 3D, and they played them. Mm-hmm. So we've had some footage on ESPN 3D, which is an accomplishment. That was really cool. Though that's to say also that there's not a lot of 3D content out there right now, so it's kind of easy to get in. Mm-hmm. But you got to have the good stuff. You want to have the good stuff. We had good stuff, and they played it, and it was just wonderful. So, if you haven't seen Peanut yet in 3D, which I don't know if it's screening, if it's opened yet, but it will soon if it hasn't yet. But, well, it's playing at the IU Cinema
right.
here beginning Thursday the 16th. So you've got, that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 opportunities to see Peanut. Their students are $3, general public is $6. Go. Go, 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 go. This documentary has been blowing people away. It's been getting a lot of word of mouth in the 3D world. And it's going to be a good one. So it'll be here at the cinema in mid-February. I think I have tickets for Saturday the 18th at 3:30. So if anybody wants to come out for a little matinee, we'll party. It'll be good.
I'm going to the 17th.
Yeah, good. And you're going. That's what's got to happen.
No, sorry, the 16th.
16th.
Can you just buy your ticket at the door?
You can buy it at the door, though. If this one proves to be as popular as it is, the IU Cinema tickets are available through the auditorium box office. The auditorium box office is open from 10 to 5 during the week. You can also go through their Ticketmaster site, but there is a service fee. I can't say what I think about Ticketmaster because we're recording, but there is a fee. But you can go up to the box office.
There's a wonderful article that I'm sure says what you think.
Yes, I'm sure there is.
Clients
Well, in a word that rhymes somewhat with master. So that's going to be happening here later on this month. So highly recommended. If you're not sure about 3D, or you're not sure about 3D as a vehicle for immersion and transportation, and you're thinking, oh, I bet it's still more of a gimmick. Watch this, because you're going to forget that there will be points where you're just amazed, you're stunned at, wow, that is a beautiful scene, or this dancer is doing something that's phenomenal. And then you'll realize after the fact, oh, I was wearing 3D glasses. That's like, that's a win right there. Because that's the point. Movies like this are not using 3D as a gimmick. They're using them as a production means and a tool to tell a story. And that's what I hope that everybody's striving for, is to tell better stories using 3D. It's an experience that's closer to the way we experience real life. Most people, and this is talking in generalities, most people can hear the world. So when you have sound in a cinema, that helps. Most people see in color. So when you have color in the cinema, that helps. Most people see in 3D. When you have 3D in the cinema, that helps. It increases the realism, the fact that you are recording the world, albeit it may be a fictitious world for a story, or it could be a real world for a documentary, and you're playing it back, and you want people to experience. You want to hear the crowd say, "It's like I was there," or "Man, that flight through the canyon on the back of that lizard just blew me away. I was getting motion sick." Yes. Mm-hmm. That's what the director wants. They don't want you to get really sick, but they want you to feel a fluttering in your stomach. Just like with other emotional states, when the heroine is threatened by the criminal, the stalker is creeping up behind her with a big knife. You want to be scared. You want to be scared for that character. Maybe in 3D you'll be more scared. Fun things right there. And this is what we're learning, though. Cinema's been around for over 150 years. The 3D, as far as the technically accomplished 3D that's comfortable and good to watch, far less time, even though 3D's been around forever, from the beginning as well. It's not been this accessible and this comfortable until now. So we're getting there. We're playing catch up. So there's some references. There's a lot of online resources that you can go to that talk about 3D and the uses of 3D. So this is the textbook that the 3D class is taught with. There are also some resources here, the Advanced Visualization Lab, of course, the IU Cinema. And a really fun one that I found recently that's been making the rounds online is the New York Public Library Stereogranimator. And the stereogranimator is an interesting exercise where they've got a big collection of old stereographs. Cards, remember the Egypt that we showed you earlier. They've got a huge catalog of stereograms, or stereographs. A stereogram is a drawn image that is viewed as a left-right pair. A stereograph is a photograph. And you can go through their stereograms, and sometimes there are technical problems. So what they allow you to do is you select one, and then you can edit it a little bit. You can crop it, you can maybe do some things with it, and then you can save it out as an anaglyph, a red cyan anaglyph cover, or what's called a wobbling GIF, an animated GIF, that flips back and forth between the left and the right view. As it wobbles back and forth, you get a sense of the depth. It's a way to view 3D. It's kind of like 2.5D, and it works. It's not a full substitute for just viewing something comfortably with a 3D display or an anaglyph even, but it's an interesting way to see something. If you don't have anaglyph glasses and you can't free viewing is what's called when you can look at a side-by-side stereo pair and either relax your eyes or cross your eyes, depending on if the pair is left on left, right on right, or crossed, right on left, left on right. You move your eyes such that the correct eye sees the correct image, your brain performs stereopsis, and you've got 3D. That's called free viewing. And so if you can't free view and you don't have an anaglyph, pair of anaglyph glasses with you, you can use the wobbly GIF right there. And so stereo.nypl.org is a pretty neat one. So there's some, they have several pictures of people walking on tightropes across buildings and canyons. For some reason, tightrope walking was really big in the 1890s and whatnot. So that's the last slide. And these are some of these resources, so I want to make sure to give people time to see, what's there. And of course, I'll be giving the slides to IDAH, so they can be made available if anybody wants those. So we'll pop back into here to the attendee list and see if anybody has any questions or anything, comments. We got Clara and Bud.
Well, it's great that Bud's there.
Yeah, I'm glad Bud made it.
I have another question. What
Sure.
about the televisions that are now coming out that say you don't need 3D glasses? Like 3D
Okay,
television?
so these are 3D TVs this is a technology called auto-stereoscopic. So an auto-stereoscopic display doesn't require glasses. It uses a technique that's called a lenticular barrier. If you've ever seen a sticker that as you roll the sticker from side to side, the scene
like a
changes,
hologram.
that's not a hologram.
Oh.
This is a lenticular sticker. Usually it's just two scenes.
Oh,
Like,
yeah, I know.
Little Boy Blue then eats his pie, right? Is he the one with the pie? Or no, Little Jack Horner with the pie? Little Boy Blue is
Blue
one.
is one.
That's all right. I wasn't there. I didn't see him eat the pie or blow the horn.
He jumped over a candle.
And no, that's Jack. And then but which Jack? There's Jack Spratt too. I don't think they're the same guy. Anyway, auto stereo displays use lenticular barrier. And the upside is you don't need glasses. The downside is because the lenticules have to be arranged in a very specific way, they're like little prisms. You only get the 3D effect from a minimum number, or a select number of what are called sweet spots or fusion zones. And most of the experimental auto stereo displays only have 3 sweet spots, the one directly in front of the display and some number of degrees off to either side, and that's it. So if you've got a family of 3 that have their seats exactly in those sweet spots, you're great. Once you have a 4th person over, somebody's got to sit in somebody's lap, and it just gets a little weird. There have been, so Philips is a research company, and they've developed a display that they claim, I believe, 11 fusion zones. And there's a researcher at IUPUI that has one, and we were able to go visit and see. And it was okay. But as you got to these other fusion zones farther away from the prime zone that's in the middle, the 3D effect lessens, and it becomes a little odd. So auto stereo displays, yes, all the major manufacturers have tried them. I saw a couple from Sony out at the National Association of Broadcasters show and a couple other places, and they're wishful thinking right now. So for the foreseeable future, for the next 5 to 10 years, I would not count on an auto stereo display as being something that you could buy for your home, or that would be suitable for use at home. The suitable is the more important part, that you could have multiple people over to view it. So having said that, there are two major types of 3D TVs out there. One type uses these what are called active shuttering glasses. So there's these battery-powered glasses that cost between about $60 and $100, and they get a signal to synchronize them from the TV. Just flip open, close, left, right, left, right, left, right. And Panasonic, Samsung, and Sony have been using active shutter displays recently. Or that was their bandwagon. The other bandwagon are displays that use polarized film inside the display and use the same polarized glasses that you get from the theater. And the big two there that use that are LG and Vizio. And Sony just yesterday announced that they were stopping production of active shutter 3D TVs and they're going to passive polarized. And then, so that's what I bought at home. So I have a passive TV from LG, and it's great because you can just use. We got a basket of glasses left over from the theater and all that. We have a bunch of people over. Hey, grab some glasses, go for it. Oh, you sat on them. Oh, here's another pair. No big deal. So that's what's going on with 3D TVs right now.